I am so excited for today's episode. We are speaking with the CEO of Femasys, Kathy Lee-Sepsick. And the way this podcast came to be, by God be the glory, it came from my sorority sister, Katie Wentworth. She is amazing. And she DM'd me last month and she was like, hey, I know you're trying to start this podcast. You should chat with and speak with my CEO. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, tell me more. And she's like, I work at this company called Femasys, and we are truly changing the way that women can get fertility treatments, contraception options. Like, we are really breaking ground in women's health. After doing my research, I fell in love with Kathy and everything that she's doing. Kathy Lee-Sepsick is the 21st woman to ever take her company public, meaning her company IPO'd. So she is in the realm of Whitney Wolf Herd of Bumble, the CEO of Stitch Fix. Like, Kathy Lee-Sepsick is incredible. Her mission and what she's doing for women's health is truly unparalleled. So all of this is truly thankful. Like, I am so thankful to my girlfriend, Katie Wentworth, who works there. So thank you, Katie. Femasys is a medical technology company focused on women's health care, especially in the areas of fertility and contraception. They develop innovative, non-surgical solutions to address unmet needs in reproductive health. Some of their portfolio includes FemBloc, a permanent contraceptive device, and FemSeed, a fertility treatment aimed at enhancing natural conception. Their mission is to provide accessible and cost-effective options for women, revolutionizing how reproductive health care is delivered. The company is committed to advancing women's health through innovation, science, and improved patient outcomes. Chatting with Kathy was truly like one of the highlights of my year. Everything she's doing, and when you get to the podcast, you'll hear about like her product roadmap and like what she's planning for the future is incredible. So I just want to give a huge shout out to my girlfriend Katie for setting this up, Kathy for being so generous with her time, and I know that you guys are going to love this episode. It was such a joy and an honor to record it. And so DM, if you have any questions, we could do a follow-up with Kathy, send me messages, let me know what you think of the episode. But I hope you guys enjoy.
Proper. So Johns Creek area.
Okay. I'm obsessed with the Buckhead area.
Like the second Buckhead is what I would say. Up by where we are.
Very nice. Okay. Let me just pull this up. One thing when I was doing all my research about you and Femasys that really stood out to me was that you started Femasys in 2004. You saw a massive gap in women's health in 2004. When I think about 2004, right, for me, I think of September 11th had just happened a couple years prior. Some like big life events were happening in that time, but weren't really focused on women's health. So how was that brought to you? Like, how did you know in 2004? Like, where were you seeing this gap? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So I am the inventor of Femasys. The inventor of the technology of Femasys. I am the founder of Femasys. So it was kind of personal for me when I decided to start the company. I looked at women's health choices for myself and said there's not a suitable option that I would undertake, specifically for permanent birth control. At the time in my life, I had 2 daughters, 7 and 4. And most women want to control their risk of pregnancy. And I thought, I don't want a hormonal approach. I don't want something that leaves an implant behind. I don't want to go to surgery. I don't want to be exposed to anesthetic risks, incisions, long recovery time for what I deem a basic healthcare need. So that was the birth of Femasys. That's the reason I started the company. And again, I'm the lead inventor on the technology. So it was very purposeful. My background was in other areas of medicine, specifically in med tech. So I knew I had the knowledge base to take what I've done and been exposed to in other areas of medicine and look to women's health and say, what would I be willing to undergo? And let me invent that.
That's
the start. Yeah.
It's interesting that you talk about hormonal birth control, because with the Chemo Club, we're now starting to see questions of the link between cancer and hormonal birth control, which is very touchy when you bring up that topic, but interesting because I think women's eyes are being opened to truly the dangers of hormonal birth control. So I think and we'll talk more about this, but what you have created and invented is incredible. And you currently hold over 100 patents, correct?
I think the last count is just under 200 now. So we have a very big portfolio of products. So we're not just looking at that permanent birth control part of the spectrum. That is why I started the company. We now have an infertility line of products, and we do have cancer diagnostic products as well. So I can go into kind of each one of those, and then we have a number of products in development. So to me, when you start a company like this, intellectual property is everything. Do you have something that you can protect? Is it truly unique? Because when you're raising money or when you're recruiting people, you need to make sure that your company has something that can really, make a difference and stand on its own and be protected. So we did, a lot of that work initially.
What is your background in the medical field?
So I have a degree in biochemistry and I have an MBA. So I wanted to combine a very scientific, nature and background to a business background and bring those two things together. And that's why I feel like I'm very well suited for the seat that I sit in, because I'm not just a scientist or someone technologically bent. I am also have strong business acumen, which is what you need to kind of build your company and take it to through the various different stages.
You are truly like the perfect CEO.
Well, you're a little bit biased, but I'll take it.
No, let me just say, just from the amount of interviews I've done so far, I'm blown away by you, like truly blown away by you. So you started this in 2004. We're now in 2024. Have you seen, is it easier now, do you think, to address women's healthcare versus when you first started?
No, it's still very challenging. And that's a very unfortunate thing. It's 2 decades that I've been at this, and we've seen lots of regulatory changes that are actually more challenging now than they were then. We're seeing a climate of changes for women's health rights that are different than they were then. So in many ways, it's much more difficult now than it was then. We also have seen the exit of some very large companies that no longer even have an initiative in women's health.
Like who?
J&J is an example. When I started the company, I'm from Jersey originally, so their headquarters, Jersey, right? So, and it's shocking, right? Because it's Johnson & Johnson. And I'm not saying I blame them for the decisions that have been made, but to not have an explicit women's health focus when it's 51% of our population is a bit shocking. So the women's health arena is very broken, particularly on the med tech side. There's just less companies from a large company standpoint, but there's also less mid-stage companies as well. There's just less of everything. So less people working in the space, less innovative products, lots of the things that we're doing, but all of the products here actually at Femasys, we're replacing many decades old technology. So there is an alternative, but I wouldn't call it suitable. So I often say there's like little to no competition. And my true heart-to-heart feeling is there's really no real competition because I don't think the options are suitable. So that's the impact that this company could potentially have as we get through this next stage.
That's insane. I want to talk about, so when I was doing my research, I was blown away by this. The women's healthcare market size right now is estimated to be worth $8.2 billion for this year, for 2024. It's anticipated to reach $10.9 billion by 2032. Now, just hearing those numbers, someone like me, I'm like, oh, that's a lot. That's pretty big. It's pretty big. When you compare that to the women's beauty industry, the women's beauty industry is projected at $648.6 billion this year. So just take those numbers. That is a massive discrepancy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when we look at the potential of our products, they're in the billions as far as impact, because there's so many women and couples that are affected by these issues. And there's so little to no innovation to address them. And it's taken me 20 years to get to the point where I'm now commercializing some of our products. 20 years. And a lot of companies just don't survive it. And they don't survive for a number of different reasons. But it's very difficult to secure funding. It's very difficult to, when you're generally talking to the decision makers, for the most part, are men. They're not issues that are as close to them. Yes, they have maybe a wife or a daughter or a sister or they all have mothers. But it's not something that hits them as personally. So there's not a fault here. It's just the reality of the situation is that the predominant number of people that make the business decisions as far as where investment dollars go, which is what funds innovation, are men.
Yeah.
So when we start to break through that, things may change. But it hasn't in 20 years, not so much.
That's so crazy to me. There also must be just also a lack of education. I also feel like is a part of it. And here's the thing, when it doesn't affect you personally, why would you ever have any interest in it, right? What am I interested in? I'm interested in health and wellness, beauty, Pilates, exercise. That doesn't interest men. So I can't even imagine why an investor would even be like, oh yeah, I want to invest in fertility. I want to invest in chemotherapy patients' rights. There's such a massive gap. And I know that we talk about it all the time. It's all that we're hearing right now because we're entering into the political season. And so the fact that you are a woman CEO dominating this and truly making change, it's a mic drop. And I just can't imagine being your daughter. I would just be so proud.
Well, I have two of them. And I hope they're really proud of what we're doing here. One's heavily involved in the company. The other one's blazing her own path. So it's, they were the inspiration to keep going at many different stages because this has been really, really, really hard every step of the way. Even when I took the company public in 2021, I didn't even have a CFO when I did it. And I understand I'm the 20-something female founder to ever do it in the history of the NASDAQ. So even that number itself shows the lack of women progressing in these types of roles. So it's a lot of responsibility, not just to make sure I invented the right products because I invented them in something I found suitable for myself, but then deliver them to the market and do it in the most efficient manner and empower women to have more choices. That's what this is about. It's not to take any choices away. It's to add to the choices so that people can make decisions based on what is right for them. No. And there's just not enough options for women. So I'm emphasizing that a lot because I'm not here to say any option at any point in time might not be the right one, as somebody goes through their reproductive journey. But what you touched on with the risks around hormones, it's particularly troublesome when somebody is 35 years of age or older. We have a higher likelihood of developing blood clots related to hormonal usage, and we have a higher risk of breast cancer. And that is now in the literature, published fact. So it's concerning if we don't have any other options when somebody says, I don't want to have any children, or I don't want to have any more children, and they don't want to go to surgery. That's just not fair to women to make that their only option. So we're the only company working on inventing a non-surgical option right now, which is crazy because, to your point, we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars of market opportunity, but it's hard. It's been 20 years for me to get to just here, and I'm still not done. That product's still in development in clinical trials. It's called FemBloc. But to us, it's going to be a game changer for women around the world.
I have goosebumps. From that whole diatribe. That's amazing. Okay, let's talk about your products. I want to talk about FemBloc. I want to talk about FemCath. I want to talk FemView, and then anything else that I'm missing. But break down to me right now, Femasys, your top products and what each one does.
So we have 6 products that have a form of regulatory approval. Okay. And then we have FemBloc, which is the one I've been working on the longest, but it's also the most highly regulated, and that one's in clinical trials. Okay. So I touched on FemBloc So I'll finish that one out. It's a non-surgical permanent birth control option.
That's
She
crazy.
walks in the office to her GYN. She receives the product. The idea is she walks out the door, resumes normal activity. Nobody has to drive her. She doesn't have to worry about what she can lift when she gets home. And then she is rendered with permanent blockage by way of her own tissue ingrowth. I didn't want to leave anything behind. So there's no implant that stays behind. We basically elicit a normal reaction, which is a wound healing reaction, and her tissue ingrows. The material we delivered leaves, and she's left with her own scar tissue. Wow. And the reason that's so important is because somebody could be relying on a FemBloc solution for 30 years if she's done having her kids in her 20s. It could be that somebody relies on it for 10 years. So we wanted longevity. We know that there is high likelihood that this is going to last a really long time as it's intended, because women walk around with blocked tubes for a variety of different reasons and they can't get pregnant. So we wanted to mimic that in our FemBloc product. So that is a game changer. We're in clinical trial. We have 6 trial sites right now around the country that people can look at. We have 2 trial sites in California even, and we're enrolling subjects into that trial. On the other side of the spectrum, we took the delivery way that we deliver for FemBloc, which we have hundreds of patients we've done this safely in as part of our clinical trial work. And we went ahead and adapted that for use for infertility. Because what we know today is the oldest reproductive method for women is IUI. It's been around the longest. We all know it doesn't work well. It's a precursor to IVF, but most women never make it to IVF. We have over 10 million infertile women, and there's only about 200,000 or so IVF cycles. So that's not even 200,000 women. So what's happening to the millions of women that are out there? They're either not going into care, stopping their care, but they're certainly not getting to the most expensive end of care. So we wanted to fill that gap. So we deliver very similar to FemBloc, and we put sperm exactly where it needs to go. Biologically, conception happens in the tube, in the fallopian tube. That's where sperm needs to meet the egg. And what we know today that we didn't know before is that men have a significant contributing factor to why infertility is occurring. About 50% of the time, it's because men have low sperm count. And unfortunately, that is on the rise. So we are going to see more issues around that. Nobody knows why. There's no treatment modalities for it for men. So if you have sharply declining sperm count, meaning there's less sperm, and you just use a standard IUI technique, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So we put the sperm, we cut that journey, and we put it right where the egg is. And then the magic needs to happen. So we've just increased the likelihood of success. We had to do a clinical trial, and then we did get the product approved by FDA the end of 23. This has allowed us, because we call this a first-line infertility option, to hire a sales force directly for the very first time in the company's history. So we're so excited. I did not dedicate 2 decades of my life and the numerous sacrifices I've had to make personally to make this happen, to have my product sit on the shelf and just go through clinical work. It's been about affecting women's health. It's been about getting it into the hands of women. So we're now at the point where we're now able to do that in a direct fashion. So we have a therapeutic FemaSeed. It's on the market. It's available. We're just starting to make it aware to all the doctors that are out there so that women can get exposure to that particular product. And it's the first line of treatment. So no egg extraction, no embryo management, nothing like what's required for IVF, no surgical technique. It's placed like FemBloc, which is go into your doctor's office, receive the product, walk out the door, and now sperm is deposited into your tube, where hopefully the magic will happen and render her pregnant. We also have a diagnostic product called FemView that you mentioned earlier. That product's been around for a bit longer as we work through all of this for the therapeutic option. FemView moves the important exam for looking at her fallopian tubes from radiology, which is expensive, requires a referral, radiation exposure, X-ray dye, and we move it to ultrasound. So it can be done by her GYN. It can be done by our infertility specialist, and we deliver natural saline and air contrast to her tubes so we can evaluate to make sure there's at least one open tube. This is essential before she goes through any treatment, including Clomid. So no ovulation stimulation until you know you have an open tube, otherwise it's for naught. And about 30% of the time, the issue around infertility for women is either one or both blocked tubes. So we need to know whether or not the plumbing is working to make it as lay as possible. And then from a FemaSeed standpoint, as long as we have one open tube, the doctor can tell, or a nurse can tell, because we had nurses doing these procedures in our clinical trial, where she's ovulating and put the sperm in the correct tube. So that's the beauty of that as well. They can selectively deliver it. And so FemView and FemaSeed go hand in hand. A complete solution that's more natural. We've taken all these other extra pieces off the table, and it's cost effective and accessible for patients.
This is a game changer. This is truly a game changer. I'm also really curious to see a couple years from now, because we're not doing the hormonal birth control, because we're not doing all the surgeries, all the anesthesia, which truly does. And I truly believe, from my lens and my view, this just adds to you being diagnosed with cancer, to see with the way that you are addressing this, to see if those numbers go down, because this is huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like first line care options. How do we make it where people get better options earlier in the course of what they're looking at contemplating doing? And how do we just make it safer for patients to undergo these treatments and more cost effective? Otherwise, what we're seeing in this country is a declining fertility rate. We have the lowest birth rates of 30 years. It just keeps going down. So people they want children, maybe they want to have a family, but if it's going to cost this, if it's going to be this grueling, they might tap out, which is what we're seeing every day in the millions. So we really want to engage. If we look at the bigger picture, the country needs fertility. We need to have more people. We're seeing in different countries around the world how catastrophic it is when you have an aging population and you don't have births. There's no birth rate replacement. So you don't have people that are going to be in the workforce. That has a very catastrophic and detrimental effects overall. And that is going to happen in this country as well. We are less than a decade away from seeing our numbers change pretty dramatically. And what are we going to do about it? So these types of products at least engage people in the process. It's not a guarantee. Not everyone's going to get pregnant, but it's a shot, an affordable shot to at least take a chance to see if this can work for them when they really have no real alternatives otherwise.
When you say affordable, so walk us through, because doing IVF is very expensive. Like, people take out like second mortgages in order to do so. So how is yours more affordable?
So, and the climate has changed also, because now we're looking at embryo management. So now so you take a woman's eggs out, surgery, create an embryo, sperm and egg together. And then when you create those embryos, you can't just discard them. Right. So then you have to maintain them. There's monthly maintenance fees, genetic testing. There's a lot involved. We don't have any of that. So envision the day that somebody comes in with their sperm, either they use a sperm donor or they have their partner's sperm, and they go through a more sophisticated next generation insemination approach. We go in like an IUD placement, which is like a FemBloc placement, straight into the patient. We didn't extract her eggs. We didn't put her through surgery. This is done without any anesthetic. Product is in, and their sperm, their own sperm, the sperm of their choice, whether they use donor sperm or their partner sperm, is delivered exactly where it needs to go. And then the product is removed a few minutes later. And then the sperm, remains behind. The sperm can live in the fallopian tube about 72 hours. So the goal is to get it into the safe zone, which is the fallopian tube, and then let it do its job. It still needs to penetrate the egg. It still needs to create an embryo that needs to attach to the uterine cavity. But this is one step closer. IUI, which is the alternative approach. So you have IVF all the way over here, which is surgery, expense, genetic testing, embryo management, egg extraction, all of that. And then you have IUI, which is less expensive, but doesn't work, because what is happening is the sperm is just deposited in the uterine cavity. Many times, over 50% of the time, there's less sperm now. So it needs to find its way to the correct tube. There needs to be enough of it. So as a point of reference, a normal fertilization, natural fertilization process, there's like 300 million sperm.
Wow.
In our studies, we tested 1 to 20 million. Right. And we got 1 out of 4 women pregnant.
No.
In our clinical study. So the results were amazing. Where in IUI, the results are abysmal. So we have an option here where 25% of patients might get pregnant from this approach, and they don't have to step into IVF, or they may continue on to IVF depending on their choice, but a true first line option to start.
Wow. How are fertility doctors taking all of this in?
Yeah, so they it's interesting because obviously they're designed to do IVF.
Right.
That's what they're practicing, and there's not enough infertility specialists. There's not enough infertility practices, and I've been so encouraged to see that they want to do the right thing by patients, even though maybe somebody doesn't make it to an IVF because they've had a FemaSeed. They still think it's the right thing to do to make sure people have options, because the majority of them won't even go on to IVF. So that's a lost patient to them, right? So we're seeing this as, a new revenue opportunity for them, where they can engage patients that they may have lost in the past, or patients even that did everything and they've run out of money and they just want to try one more thing. Journey is so different for every single person and couple. The LGBTQ community that's coming forward and saying, I want to have a child. How do I go about that in the best way and fashion? So we've seen a really great response to the product. And at the end of the day, it hurts no one. Why not offer it? Let people have a choice.
I interviewed a couple weeks ago. She's really famous here. Her name's Dr. Amy. She's also known as the Egg Whisperer. I don't know if you are familiar with her. Remind me after this to make an introduction to her.
Okay.
You two would hit it off, but she is a fertility doctor, and we had the most amazing conversation. She would love this. So, side note for me to make an intro. In March of this year, you did something so cool. You went to the White House and you met with the Gender Policy Council. What did you guys talk about? How did that work? Was this your first time at the White House? Give me the down low.
So I have been to the White House twice. And the first time I met with a number of Congress people from both sides of the aisle with interest in women's health and women's rights and how do we bring forward technology. So, it's just really enlightening and energizing to be able to be around people that are trying to make policy decisions and move the needle for women. I got invited the second time to meet with Cancer Moonshot, which is their cancer initiative related to cervical cancer. That is the one area in medicine that they decided to focus on. And I think partly because they really felt like they could make meaningful change with cervical cancer as we see cervical cancer rates on the rise. At Femasys, we developed a product called FemServe. It's a next generation way to take a tissue sample where right now the current method is it uses a tool called Kevorkian. And it's a metal tool that's rectangular and it scrape, and it causes a lot of pain and discomfort and bleeding. And the sample is generally, not quite as good as it should be to make decisions. And then when you get a not good sample, you make decisions that could include surgical intervention where you're taking off parts of people's bodies that could have been, maintained when the stuff comes back negative. So we have developed the FemServe product, which takes a comprehensive sample, and patients reported no pain at all. So we are super excited about that product. I told you we just started commercializing our infertility products. We're a small company doing a lot of things, but to be able to go and talk about this initiative to the Cancer Moonshot folks and to have the interest level be what it was and to have them acknowledge that there's nothing new but FemServe is so exciting. So we're going to continue our work there. We also have a product in development that would be for uterine cancer diagnosis. And we feel like that product will walk hand in hand with our cervical diagnostic product and will really make a big difference for women and their practitioners as they try to make good decisions together. For the gender policy group, we talked both in terms of our permanent birth control product, because there's nobody working in this area. We are advancing the only non-surgical permanent birth control product through FDA right now. So that's a very big initiative, particularly on the backside of a pandemic, when we see OR time being challenging. OR time's way more expensive than it was before. So average cost before the pandemic, $6,000-$7,000 for a tubal ligation surgery, now $10,000 plus. And you look at our procedure, it'll be a fraction of the cost, and patients resume normal activity. So they don't lose work time and productivity time, and you don't have the risk of infection and all those things that come alongside surgery. So there's a lot of excitement about that product and how perhaps there could be support for us around bringing that to women quicker. Yeah. And then the other interest was, of course, infertility. There is an acknowledgement that we have a very big fertility problem in this country. We are not going to have enough people in our workforce in less than 10 years' time. So how do we take new innovation like FemaSeed, like FemBloc, when there isn't anything new in the front end of care, and how do they support us? So we're still waiting on how it all becomes supportive, but that was the first step in the process, is to build awareness. There's just a lot of people don't know who Femasys is. Like I said, I took the company public in 21, but it's during a pandemic. And so, we have a venue to be able to get the word out, but we need more eyes on the story, people that'll watch your podcast. Check us out. If every woman supported us, we wouldn't be we'd have more resources and more ability to be able to make more products or get the products we were making out into the market. It's a hard thing to fund a company working in women's health.
I'm going to do my best to get the word out, because this is incredible. So once you meet with the White House and you're talking to the Gender Policy Council, what do you hope next steps are? This is about creating awareness. I understand that. Are we hoping now that this group is going to start to either fund initiatives or create some sort of legislature? What do next steps look like?
So, I think it's twofold. Oftentimes we see funding opportunities that are for early stage, to get it kicked off. It's almost always the case. Nobody really wants to fund a company that's obviously wants to be profitable. Right. So it's, they're funding foundations, they're funding all these various different things. But companies like mine have made it through all those stages. We have regulatory approvals. We're struggling to be able to build it fast enough to get it into the hands of women so that we can move the needle and change overall fertility patterns in this country. So being supportive of a company at our stage would be really helpful, because the support is so early stage, and most of those companies don't make it. And they certainly don't look like Femasys. They don't have lots of different products. So there isn't really been a model for that, and I'm not sure there ever will be. But it would be nice if we were able to get support to fund these initiatives further, because it means quicker access for women. So that's one hope and desire. Not sure it'll ever be reality. The second is looking at legislation. How do we bring better reimbursement? If we have a fertility crisis in this country, which I think people can easily become very well versed and aware of, how do we allow patients to at least take the first step in the journey? Better reimbursement. We don't have universal reimbursement coverage for infertility care. I get it. It's because IVF is very expensive. Some of the political party lines have talked about, how do we make IVF, available to all women? Super expensive. So it may be that we start in the beginning and at least cover diagnostic care for everyone, so they can at least know where they stand, or cover the first step like FemaSeed. That is a fraction of the cost of an IVF. That would be a game changer. One, because people could then take that financial piece off the table. And two, from a global perspective, that means more people that want to have children actually do. Mm-hmm. Everybody wins, because we're going to be making people happier and making couples and families and, the things that we want to engage people to be able to, accomplish in their lives. So both of those things would be really strong wishes, because it's just better access for women.
This is going to be a dumb question. And if it is dumb, I will cut it out of the podcast. This is like, no, seriously, like I'm embarrassed to ask this, but I feel like a lot of people are going to have this question. You say that you need more funding, but you are a public company. So when you say you're looking for more funding, how does that work for a public company? Because can you still take investor money like Andreessen Horowitz? Like, can they still invest? Like, how does that work?
So as a public company, we're traded on the NASDAQ.
Yes.
Our symbol is FEMY, FEMI.
Okay.
So somebody can easily go buy stock like in their portfolio. They can go to their account and their whatever account that they're using, and they can buy stock, no problem. But if we want to raise a large sum of money, because that could add up to be a large sum. I mean, imagine lots of women go in and buy even 100 shares of stock.
Right.
Everybody did that. That would amount to a lot of money. But if we were to say we need X number of millions of dollars to fund the development of this, the next run of it, and we wanted to go get a bolus of that, we would have to do a structured financing. And that means the people across the table are going to need to say, yes, I want to invest in women's health. Yes, I want to do something in birth control when birth control has had its issues, especially a previous permanent birth control option that came to market that would have been on the market, a similar indication as FemBloc. So when you have crisis in a market, when you have something that didn't work out in a grandiose fashion, people get worried and people get scared. So when to attract that, and then we're competing against doing just another cancer deal of somebody with just rats in a cage, as an example, early stage, we compete with those deals all the time. So it's where do people have their comfort to put the bigger numbers in? And that's a bolus of capital that we would bring in to fund these projects. So anyone can invest in Femasys. Like, you just go online and invest. But when you want to have larger sums of money, that's the kind of financing that I'm referring to.
Understood. Okay, thank you. What was it like taking your company public in the midst of a pandemic?
In some ways, I call them COVID positives. I say this a lot in my building. There were some COVID positives. Obviously, there were some very COVID negatives, of having a pandemic and the effect it had on a lot of people's lives. But I was able to take my company public by Zoom. So, wow. That's a COVID positive, right? It was very efficient. I could speak to investors coast to coast, and it didn't matter. There wasn't a plane running, flying back and forth, and I could do it efficiently over a few days as opposed to a week and a half or so. So that was really awesome to be able to do that. It was hard because as a company, as a women's health company, we have chronically been underfunded, and we do a lot with Femasys. I mean, we have our own manufacturing here too. So I don't third-party outsource any of our manufacturing. That's very unusual. So I have all the infrastructure under our roof. We have almost a 50,000 square foot facility with multiple clean rooms, and everything I've talked to you about, we make in-house. So we control that process. We've also been able to make it where we can then lower the cost when we go to the patients, because over a decade of perfecting manufacturing we've done and really have dedicated to this, because this is about more than the whole point of doing this is getting it to patients. So if you want to get it to patients, you have to be able to make enough.
Yes.
If you need to make enough, you need to make money doing that, so you're not losing money every time you sell one. So you have to be efficient. And a lot of companies, because you only have so much money and maybe aren't so thoughtful about that process, don't do this. So when they get to the end and they clear the regulatory milestones, they have inventory issues. They may have quality issues. We're hearing about recalls regularly.
Recalls happen all the time.
Right. So I did not want to be that company. So I dedicated, well over a decade of this journey into manufacturing. So these types of things all require a lot of time and financial resources. So part of the IPO process was a little bit challenging because companies that were going out might have one product.
Yes.
Most of them do. They're a pure play. It's easy to understand. One product. They don't have any manufacturing. They're part of everything. And here we have broad portfolio of products. Many products that we're working on for women. We have full blown manufacturing. They're like, wait a second. So where's the focus? How many people do you have there? I mean, it's an extremely well-run company. We are very efficient. I am 5 years ahead of this company at any point in time. Planning. Call me the consummate mom for this company.
Yeah.
So being able to run the various different things and stay ahead of it, because you can get a bolus of money, but you can't turn it fast enough.
Right.
You need years. I mean, some things took us 3, 4, 5 years to put into place and do it well. So all of that from an investor standpoint can be overwhelming. Oh, that's a lot. That's, maybe too much. So I think, we are always fighting the Femasys does all of this. Why are your stock here? Why, instead of constantly being rewarded
Yes.
for the fact that we don't look like anyone else, the fact that we were so thoughtful about the way that we've done this, the fact that our gross margins are what you'll see of companies that are 5 years out in the market, and we're doing that from day one. All those things that you would reward someone for, it almost feels like we get punished for because it's too much. So it's it's women's health too. There's been a lot of catastrophes in women's health.
Yeah.
So in a very grandiose public way. And so when you're working in this area and those things have happened, even though I'll say it's natural, we don't leave anything behind. I have 5-year safety data.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I don't hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Never going to hurt anyone. Haven't hurt anyone yet. So that's been the premise of our products. It may not work every time for whatever reason, but we're never going to hurt someone. That's the goal. And that's sometimes hard to grapple with. So I'd say the public offering was glorious to be able to have an exit. It's have something where people can support us by way of being a public entity. We have access to capital in a way that we didn't have as a private company. We're not beholden to a few investors that decide they don't like women's health anymore. We are now able to go out into the market. And when we build awareness, when your podcast airs, people can support us. There's a way to do that. And, if we see people support us and hold the stock, that's when the company wins and then women win. That's how the magic happens. If it's not somebody just trying to make a penny for the day or two
Exactly.
pennies for the day, if they're really somebody who says, I believe in this mission, and the stock's valued where it is, which is, I consider extremely undervalued, then they can ride that wave for us into the future, and they'll hold. And that's how you see the profile of a company like ours that could change overnight.
While you were private, how many women investors did you have?
I can't think of so the early years when I raised my first $1 million that I raised, there were some women in there.
Okay.
But when we were talking about more of the professional rounds, the larger rounds, they were all men. Medtronic did invest in our round before I went public. So that's a really high endorsement. And I will say what was also unusual is I didn't have any venture capital money. I raised all of the money, which was north of $70 million, on the backs of high net worth individuals, family offices that supported Femasys. There was even an occasion where I had somebody that was an LP in a major venture fund, and the venture fund passed, but the LP invested. So to think somebody who was a major contributor to a venture fund wanted to support this company, but their venture fund found a way to not, tells the story in and of itself. So when I took the company public, there was no institutional investors, which makes it a little bit unique and challenging because a lot of times your institutional investors kind of will support it. I had a lot of support from what's called insiders of that family network and high net worth individuals that supported the company for the public offering. But it's very unusual in that way.
I mean, that's just a testament and speaks highly of like who you are. You're passionate, you're educated, you're smart. beyond impressed. Are you friends with any of the other women who have taken their companies public? Like, I automatically think Whitney and Bumble. Like, did you talk to any of them before you?
No, I mean, I stayed real focused in the healthcare. You know, I mean,
stay in your lane.
I stayed in my lane. Yeah. And it's because it's different. Healthcare has so much regulation. There is so much extra. We don't just make something and sell it. We make something and we fight for it and fight and more testing, more studies, more to clear the regulatory hurdles, which for women's health continue to seem to rise year over year. And so there's so much sensitivity when a product doesn't make it and then FDA gets a black eye as a result of it. So, you know, I know we're paying a penance for other people's failures. It's happening because what the requirements for us are not the same, nowhere near the same. And our safety profile is a million times better. So you pay penances along the way. And that's just not the case for other, you know, I don't know of another female founder healthcare. A lot of the, you know, women's health companies are run by men.
Yes. Yep.
Unless it's like an app or something like that. But from a device standpoint, you know, I feel like I'm kind of in a unique position in that way.
Yeah. You can, it must feel like an extra heavy burden.
The whole thing's been, you know, every time I took $1 from an investor, and anyone who's invested with me, I carry it with me every step of the way. And I think that's why we've shown how efficient we are, the ability to do as much as we've been able to do. It's because every dollar was stretched to be way more than $1 here at Femasys. It's the only reason we're still here doing the magnitude of the amount of work that we're doing on the backs of so few. But it's, you know, I feel the burden to get this out in the market. I always, it's about women. So if I don't get it out to them, we fail. And the investors fail. So that's the whole premise of this. This is why I've sacrificed as much as I have every step of the way, is because I know we're going to help make babies. I know we're also going to help women not stay on hormones. I have women that don't want to use condoms. Condoms aren't effective. Like all those things that are happening in women's lives every day. You know, they will be able to touch a Femasys product and maybe have their lives be improved.
How is Gen AI going to play a role with Femasys?
AI? Is that what you just asked? How is artificial?
Yes. How is Gen AI going to play a role in Femasys?
Yeah. So I don't see.
Are we scared of it?
Look, I think it's gotten so big. It's just a coined term. And then there's companies that are like, this is what we do. So more money going there instead of here. Right.
Yes.
But what I think is it'll serve a role maybe one day in helping augment medical decisions, algorithms. There's not enough doctors. They're pulled in all different directions. And we're seeing more procedures being done by what's called advanced practice providers, like APPs, like nurses, MAs, PAs. They didn't go to medical school. They're taking the burden of a lot of things on their shoulders. What role could it play in augmenting people that may not have all of that expertise to ensure that they still deliver the best patient care? So it's not here and now for us. It's not something we've included in any of our immediate product offerings, but I always see it as a tool in the toolbox. You know, how do we incorporate it where we can make our tools better, safer for women?
Yep. The term sacrifice has been brought up a lot in our hour. Sacrifice for women, I think, is very different than sacrifice for men. You're a mom, you're a CEO, but you also have a personal life. How were you able to still be so successful professionally and personally while you're making a lot of these sacrifices? And do you feel like there's this narrative saying that if you are a powerhouse professional woman and a mom, you can't be successful at both? And I don't know for me how I feel about that. Now, listen, I'm not a mom, so I have no idea. But I don't know what I think about that narrative just yet, because a part of me is like, well, I don't know why you can't do both. But then the other part of me says, yes, I can see it, because in order to be successful at something, you have to give it your 100%. What are your thoughts around that narrative? Or like, where do you stand with it?
It's something has to give, right? Because there's only so many hours in a day. Mm-hmm. And what I'd say is, and my children often remind me of this, like my hobbies work.
Your hobby is work. Yes.
Okay. So, yep. And I love that both of my daughters love Femasys. Like, it's been a part of their lives. This is a true startup. We worked out of my home for the first few years before we went into our first facility. So people coming in and out of my house every day, yep. All hours of the day, weekends as well. So they never, they experienced it very firsthand, and both of them were inspired by it. So they didn't go the other direction, but every dinner conversation was about Femasys. Femasys people, Femasys products, where are we going with this? And my husband and I have been together since we were 18 years old. And
oh my God.
We ended up keeping him home. So he ended up being a stay-at-home dad, which I don't necessarily think he saw as his destiny, but it worked because I needed to know I could leave.
Yes.
And somebody had the kids' backs and they could go. But I also didn't want to miss anything. So I was somebody who always show up, even if I was late.
Yep.
So I think it really, sitting at the top of any organization, being a CEO requires a tremendous amount of focus and sacrifice. It's just given. Being a mom, if you want to be a mom, requires another level where there are so many memories I have of them doing their homework while I was working with them. Now, I wasn't doing, photo albuming, like there's pictures in it.
Scrapbooking.
Nothing that was because as they say, my hobbies work. So for me, it was always work while they're working too. Yeah. So, but come home for dinner. Mm-hmm. And then we all work together. So mm-hmm. That's kind of how I sort of managed it. I'm sure they felt it. The stress was, and managing the stress is always a challenge because you don't want to impart your decisions on your children, because they didn't make these choices. So it's always kind of a reminder of, this is your stress and you need an outlet too, but your stress and you get to manage it because you're the adult. So part of it was always, balancing act. Mm-hmm. But I love what I do so much. I just love it. And I'm 20 years, you can hear the passion. Everyone always tells me this. I'm like this every day and I'm super tired today, which is probably why I'm talking about sacrifice so much. But, a couple hours of sleep, but I love it so much. And I love and I often say this, people can go to work every day and have an impact. What I'm doing here at Femasys, the inventions that I've created, the work that we're doing here, and the people I've gotten to join this team to work here and work with me, and the demands that I, ask of them, it's because we're going to impact women's health. And when we bring that, it's going to last a really long time. And there's not a lot of people in this world that can say, I helped millions. And to be able to say that I carry that around with me, I believe it in my heart and soul. And so you do your work and it doesn't feel like work because I just love it so much. I really do. I love what we're doing here every day. And maybe that's why my kids didn't turn against it. They actually are both scientists. They're both, one's going to be a dentist. The other one works here at Femasys, and they're dedicated to helping people. And they're always Femasys. What's going on with Femasys? It never was a negative. It was always a positive, but I just included them in every step of the journey. So that it was just part of the instead of just taking it off the table, I made them part of the journey.
That is huge. And I think that is such a great piece of advice for other women entrepreneurs who are kind of entering now into this motherhood role of making them a part of the journey. Because I do think in the end that your kids will thank you for that. I think there comes a level of maturity that you're also instilling in these kids at a very young age.
Yeah. And actually, I think they carry some of the burden for me sometimes, mm-hmm. Because they know how important this is. And I kind of always say this to they never deviated off a path. Like, they're such great girls. And I think they thought, I gotta believe that they knew, if I go off kilter, there's no way my mom's going to be able to handle this. So it's knowing, I had such great support all the way around, and they followed their own dreams and they made good decisions. And I didn't have to deal with something that was tragic or traumatic, or, bumps always,
Totally.
there's not all rainbows, but that it made me be able to do what I'm doing effortlessly, because I had them do what they needed to do as children and make good choices. They did what's right for themselves ultimately, but ultimately that meant they were doing right by me and my husband, so that we didn't have to worry. And then take that mind share. It didn't ever go elsewhere, because they were always running such a great path. So I'm so grateful for that, because I see other families struggle, and it breaks my heart, because it's hard to stay focused on anything when you have to contend with life. So life's been good to me. Life's been really good to me, so that I've been able to be good to Femasys. So it's that gift that's going to keep going, which means it's going to be good for women.
So for the women listening to this podcast, when this goes live, I know people are going to say to me, how do I get FemBloc? How do I get with Femasys? Like, what do I do? What do we do?
So for FemBloc, we are running a clinical trial. So we don't have sites everywhere in the country. We have them across the country, but not in every, neck of the woods. So they can easily go to the FemBloc website, take a questionnaire, and it pushes you to a close by clinical trial site if that's of interest. It's still a clinical trial. For FemaSeed, very different, because that is commercially available. So is FemView. They can ask their doctors about it, which will still build. And rest assured, most likely your doctor will say, I don't know anything about this, because we're in the very beginning of building awareness of the company and awareness of the products itself. Our websites are designed for patients. So go to the website, learn. There's a contact us page where you can fill it out. We have people that fill out and tell us their stories because they want to. And then, we can, as we're bringing up physicians, we can connect the two together, or proactively call and say, I'm interested in FemaSeed. You don't know about it? Well, maybe you should, because that will help us on the other side as we're trying to build awareness. There's so much help, like organically, that can happen. These products are approved. They're safe. They work. People just don't know about them.
Yeah.
So take your healthcare into your own hands. Women are super good about doing that.
They really are.
And go get it. So make the phone calls, because if they hear from patients that they want it, they will contact us, and then they'll get prioritized, and we'll send somebody so they can get product and they can get going. So part of it is limitations on funding, means we don't have enough people out there for everyone. But if it comes to us in a variety of different ways, it gets our attention so we can get it done. We're here to serve women. We're doing the best that we can. So know that, let your audience hear when I say that's our mission. We're still super small, and I hope that we're able to get bigger as we continue on, so we can get this out there faster. But call your physicians and talk about it and ask for it, and be your own advocate. Learn about it. Get on the website. Understand it. Our clinical work is up there, because it's your body, it's your future, it's your journey. No one's going to hand it to you.
Oh, that's so good. What do the next 5 years look like for you?
I could not be happier with execution. Like, I've worked so hard to get to this point. This is a turning point for us as a company. This is where we're actually putting the products in people's hands to deliver it. We've done it in the clinical trial realm. I've been at a lot of the clinical trials, so I've met a lot of the women out there. Probably didn't even know it was me, because I don't really announce it. But, I'm the inventor, and I've been in that room because it's real. I get to see the impact it's having on people's lives and the sacrifices they're willing to make to come into a clinical trial to move the needle for women. Those are research heroes. But I've seen it firsthand. Now I want to see it across the country, because we've done all this work, and now I want to see the benefit of this every day when we start to hear patient stories, when they call to share their stories. People do YouTube videos on FemView. They haven't done them on FemaSeed yet. So they're like, it's what keeps us going. And then, we are looking outside the country as well. We have a Spain partner now. People are desperate internationally, Japan. Like, we see all these issues with fertility particularly, and we want to make sure, we also help women, beyond the US borders. But those are big wishes. Your company's still small. So in 5 years, I want all of that to be a reality. I want to be, I'm bold anyway, so I'm going to say it. I would love nothing other to be a major women's health player where we can take other technologies as well, not just the ones that we've homegrown here, because we haven't in-licensed anything, but how do we partner and get companies that are doing one product that really aren't going to make it? It's too expensive. Get them folded into the bag so that we can bring better care, even if it's not earth-shattering like the products we chose to develop ourselves, but are still meaningful. Like, maybe they find a home at Femasys and we can offer lots of products to women from one location. But I think we have a really strong opportunity to be able to be that.
You're incredible. Okay, so for everyone listening, go onto the Femasys website, call your doctor, ask your doctor, create awareness around the products that you're interested in, that you want to do. Anything else that I'm missing?
Follow the stock.
Follow the stock. That's another really important thing. And we'll have to do a part 2 of this because I know you got to go. But you make decisions. The consumer makes decisions. The consumer has power. One thing I've also noticed is that moms make change. Moms truly hold the power. But you also hold the power with stock. And a lot of women don't invest. And that is another really important thing that I think we need more education around, is why aren't women investing? Do they feel held back? Do they don't feel educated enough? But if you do invest, if you're interested into it, look into investing into you. And the NASDAQ code is FEMY.
It is.
Okay. And then, are you on social media?
Yes.
Okay. So
we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Twitter.
Yes. Are we on TikTok?
Twitter. Excuse me. TikTok, not TikTok. Twitter. So yes, you can find us. We do lots of press releases, podcasts. All of it's on our website. Lots of links. Lots of ways to continue to follow our progress, and just spread the word. Because the quicker the word spreads about who we are and what we're doing, and then the interest level around it from patients themselves, it will make a difference. It will help us get it into your practitioner's hands so that you can have, so your listeners can have exposure to it.
Thank you so much. Truly, thank you for everything.
Thank you.
I am going to end the recording, but stay on the camera for like 2 seconds.
Sure.